BTWRLM179. Do crickets ever forget? Do they ever know? Is there a memory? Are we thinking? Are we not? Are we just thinking? Are we acting? What are we doing? Week in and week out. This week I've been really torn with what's going on. Over last week, an issue I wasn't even going to talk about has kind of made itself very, very present to, I must not be doing my part to explain to you all how to look at stuff and cut through a lot of the nonsense. And I understand today is a very special day in history. 9/11. 9/11. I'm told the event changed America forever. I'm advised on that important day Rome's was born. So happy birthday, Rome's. Glad to have you such a powerful influence in the RLM chat room. As an aside, don't forget Building 7. That's the day they went and done it. And I'm not referring to the box cutters. And the problem I've been looking at, we're still wallowing, I said this in the UCY chat, we're still wallowing in this nonsense, this deception. And we haven't properly responded. The people have not properly responded. Crickets are the ruling class. And to my mind, it's not acceptable. And I come here well after that time, finally getting onto an internet broadcast network, to taking the advice of a friend of mine to try and tell more people how to get stuff done that we were doing at the time. And I brought up a concept, and a lot of people that listened to, some people that listened to me still listen to me since then. Back in 2009, I brought up the concept of the stalking horse. And it was in relation to an Indian tribe out in Oregon way. The people themselves, the native people themselves, not in line with the corporate tribal council that was running roughshod over their needs and wishes. And so this last few weeks comes up, and we know we have another supposed tribal issue. And I say supposed because when we get into the things we need to know, we find out, if we look very carefully, what I've been trying to explain to you all to do. The clues of deception are rife throughout the so-called media. And what was interesting to see is it's even extended into, in this case, the tribal media itself. And as I said, there's whole lots of things going through my mind on even how to present this all to you. But in particular, I wasn't even going to talk about it. As I said, this pipeline up there in the Dakota area. I mean, Dakota Access Pipeline. I just wasn't going to talk about it. I've seen so many of these things go through. I figured by now everybody should see the deception, and we can really start focusing on what we need to do. And throughout the last week, it just got worse and worse. And to my mind, I'm not seeing much of anybody really doing an independent research, taking that information for what it tells you, and coming up with any kind of factual interpretation, which is certainly found in the clues of which were found in an article that I was given in the RLM chat, reallibertymedia.com chat, last Sunday after the broadcast, hours after. And because it started to kind of get a little bit of momentum, even though I was not interested in it. And my main thing about not being interested in it is because we're talking about, well, they supposed tribal land, reservation land. And for me, it's not my land. There's nothing I can say about it. There's nothing I can do. The only thing that can happen is the people that have the land have to do what they need to do. This is just property law. Again, the black and white of the land disposal, soil disposal, requires that you have to go to the facts, and nobody that's party to that has a say. And I see enough people doing the wrong thing all the time. I don't need to incorporate more of that in my mind while I'm trying to work with people that are trying to get something done to change that, even as little bit as it seems. But I was disappointed and dismayed at what I was watching throughout the week. I did not. I asked for the treaty on Sunday night. Didn't get anything. Got an article, which ends up being a pretty pivotal article, and I thought it was pretty honest, straight up, about this issue. It wasn't until a couple days later that I obtained through Twitter, through Gary L, putting up the fact that this was supposedly involving the Laramie Treaty of 1868. It's the first time now I'm seeing of the times that they're talking about a treaty being involved, I get to see the treaty. I don't have time to go track this down. I was hoping anybody who was truly interested would start to do the legwork themselves, and finally 2 days later Gary L pulled up the fact that there was a treaty there that we could read. And so I dove into the images, which I really can't make out. They're very hard for me to read. I mean, the letters are there, but I noticed that one word was kind of messily spelled, and I really couldn't make it out, and it started to take me too long to analyze it. And so I decided to go find the text of it, the printed text of it. So I found the text, and I found 3 different sources, and they all were considerate of each other. They all seemed to be pretty accurate. And so I just chose the one that I choose normally because it just seems to be good enough to go to. The Avalon Project website has these all these documents. You know, I send you the Libre code to go read their version of the Avalon's version of the Libre code. So I was using the text version. Then it became a question of whether or not that was actually source during the week, during a few hours, days, one a day as we went through. Well, the text, as we go into, and this is where I started to become, when I saw all this, I started to get very disappointed it's almost completely understandable at one level, but how we respond to it, the people that would listen to me respond to it, caused a dismay in me. Because when I went to the treaty, and I'm only taking this on face value that all this stuff is relevant, and then being led by a story here, I'll read through here real quick, that I got on Sunday night. It's just information. I'm just working on a surface level. I get an intuitive response to how all this works. I do have a vocabulary in me, and it's not just a dictionary. This is a vocabulary of terms that is used. These terms, these words, these multiple word terms are used throughout the law that I've read. And so I can identify by the words being used where I should be considering looking in the law that they're coming from, anybody's talking. And so, as I tell you, you apply not just these dictionary terms. There's terms that are defined in the statutes and the codes and the orders where you can get black meaning red and red meaning white, but you can get the term, the many word term that's one word actually. It has one meaning. Many words have one meaning. Those things are used in particular places, and that guides you to what you're going to be, the subject matter underlying the point. That I got the text of this treaty that was said to be applicable. And it took just a little bit to read through it. And I always look, I don't know everything. I certainly don't know about a lot of Indian land things. I know some, and we're completely on record about not agreeing to how Indian peoples have been treated as we learn more of the truth. But that doesn't, in my mind, give everybody carte blanche to just do anything either. And I've learned that from the soil disposal laws, and that creates the foundation when you're dealing in land on how to deal with all land issues. And so I'm focusing on that more than what I see. I already sense through this one first article, it says 5 things to know about the Dakota Access Pipeline fight. I've already seen some things in there that are not really cool, not cool at all. what I fight all the time, folks. I just tell you, I've seen this before as well. It's the same people, the same group of people coming up in different names, but the similar purpose. And with the similar purpose, not dissimilar, but the similar purpose. So I've already got a flag up for this problem. Then I read the treaty, folks. And when I tell you, you got to get the black and white in your eyes. Last Sunday night, I was trying to get people to give me the documentation so they would get the documentation, so they would read, and we could find out what it was that the Indians, the so-called Indians, I don't know what's going on here, who's actually making the sloganeering here is what you're dealing with ultimately. Whoever's making that sloganeering is actually driving the horse here. And I say that particularly because I'm going to move into something I talked about 2009, folks. Most of the listeners that have been around with me for all that time know I've talked about it when you hear it, whether or not you actually remember how it works. They're driving this horse. And I read the treaty, and right there in the treaty, folks, if you just look at the black and white, it shows that this issue is not an issue under the treaty, the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. And for those of you wanting to know about this, I've compiled a bunch of links. Again, I did quite a bit of looking to find stuff that I'll have for you in the blogcaster. You can go through this yourself. So I found right in the Fort Laramie Treaty, and stick with me on all this, I would hope, even if it's not interesting, because it's going to give you some insight on how you analyze the transparency. I'm doing this because somewhere I've failed to empower you all and how to look through this. Somewhere you're not listening, or I'm not telling you, or something. There's a disconnect. It's a chasm that's still there. The rickety bridge I built to show you how to look at transparent things has failed this week to me in what I see this subject matter. That's the only reason why I think I'm going back to talk about it, because as I said in one of the Twitters, you can find me on Twitter behind a Woodshed. Well, the ultimate thing was the Indians better get their head on straight about this, because this is going to affect everyone, because there's an underlying agenda going on, actually a couple of them that I suppose that nobody really understands, even though I talk about it all the time. I talk about these things all the time. And despite that, I'm seeing some major failures in how we address this. Because if we miss this, it just shows me we're missing it, and we're going to miss it next time and the next time and the next time. If we catch it, we might actually be able to do something for ourselves. Now, this is everybody. Getting back to the treaty. In the treaty itself, if you read the black and white, it shows prior consent was given to this pipeline. Now I'm pausing because all these thoughts rush in my mind. How do I even approach all the things that are going through my mind when I'm reading? This whole thing has been presumed upon a silence that we're talking about the reservation. So before I go further, in reading the treaty, I'm telling you, you can go read it yourself, and I'll have a link later. You can find it yourself now if you want to see it. It's Article 10, the 6th introduction, where the Indians that signed the document gave the United States authority to put utility or necessity across their land. And I learned a lot about this, about things in this treaty as well. It's very interesting it's a short document, but it's very interesting what was going on then and how it was going on, what was being said, what didn't get said, what got protected, what didn't get protected. And so when I saw the provision of the treaty, presuming we're talking reservation land, to be giving prior consent, and all the news was yelling to high heaven that there was violations going on, it confirmed my flag was needed to be raised higher. So let me read through some of this thing on the first article that was handed to me in the chat that I do believe is a pretty straight up article. And in it is all the clues that anybody with the eyes to see should have started a flag waving for warning, at least. North Dakota's Standing Rock. I find this word standing now very interesting with respect, and I will get to it. Hopefully we'll get to all of this and more. Standing Rock, and ultimately the decision that comes down on this Friday in my estimation, would have to do with the very word standing. North Dakota's Standing Rock Sioux tribe took to Washington this week in its growing legal battle against a major pipeline project. Now, what I found interesting here, after I read after I understand all this knowledge now, it comes after the fact. During the week, I didn't understand. My question is, these Article 1 courts are just incompetent as heck. And yet, but I told you have to analyze every case for what its merits are. And in the treaty, it talks about where the Indians have to go in treaty matters. And they have to take their case to Washington. It's right there. So I can see right here now, they know exactly what they're doing as far as doing their remedies. But the punchline to the joke, it's a multiple punchlines to this joke, turns up right near the end. And I'm really concerned for us as people, whether we want to call yourself just an Indian, you want to call yourself an American, whatever you want to call yourself. Those people that live in this land we call America are in some real trouble from what I can see here. Let me continue reading. The growing legal battle against a major pipeline project. The tribe says the North Dakota Access Pipeline threatens its sacred sites and imperils drinking water near the North Dakota Reservation. Now, when I first read it, I missed a clue word right there, but when I saw public sites, it threatens its public sites, I realized we're not talking treaty rights here that I ever understood was ever in a treaty. Now, it doesn't mean I've read every treaty. What my point is I saw here, when you talk about these sacred sites, you're talking about a different law than a treaty that I'm familiar with, not precluding the possibility. Now, just to throw in on top of this so I can maybe make this a little simpler, I learned a few days later after reading this that the treaty does not hold reservations for sacred sites. And so it confirms my first intuition of why they're using the term sacred sites. It's a different law. It's not the treaty. Green, and here's the third paragraph, short sentences here, folks, easy to follow. Green and anti-fossil fuel groups have taken up the tribe's cause, setting in motion one of the highest profile pipeline fights since President Obama rejected the Keystone XL pipeline last year. That flag got really big right there on that sentence, folks. This brings up my 2009 broadcast. I talk about a particular type of horse as it relates to another Indian tribe out Oregon way. Let me read that again so you can pick this up. Green and anti-fossil fuel groups have taken up the tribe's cause. How is that actually possible, folks? Actually, when you understand what this is all about, green and anti-fossil fuel groups, how do they take up the tribe's cause? It's really not possible. And so that's the big alarm that should be going off right there. And when you deal with these types of people, these green and anti-fossil fuel, these eco-terrorist groups that have taken advantage of us in the courts as producers and Americans, generally, the property rights, you start to and you know the dynamics, and you've had to deal with them, and you've had to fight them in court. You can see the writing on the wall. Green and anti-fossil, this is not even the Indian people taking on their own cause. This is no different than the corporate tribe in Oregon deciding for the Karuk people against and contrary to their wishes what the Karuk Council wanted to put in as a corporate entity in league with Sustainable Development Principles underlying UN advancement of the women, children, and the indigenous. But now green group and anti-fossil fuel groups are in on this. And I'm saying a little bit, I'm kind of dragging here. You have to understand the complexity of the problem now. Anti-fossil groups, you're talking carbon tax, you're talking carbon penalties, you're talking the climate change, you're talking all this nonsense. They're taking up the tribe's cause? I highly doubt it. And if we look clearly, I think I look clearly at a lot of this. I think I look very objectively at all this. They're going to find that out. Here are the 5 things to know about the fight over the Texas access. What is Dakota Access Pipeline? The Dakota Access Pipeline is a 1,170-mile pipeline that would, at peak capacity, deliver up to 570,000 barrels of Bakken crude oil daily from North Dakota to Illinois. I won't go through all the details there. The point is, it's a pipeline that runs quite a ways. It's a $3.7 billion project from developers and energy transfer partners, which has secured nearly all the permits, federal and state, it needs to move forward. Workers have begun clearing and grading work along much of the pipeline's route. This is just a thing I'm reading that I read last Sunday. I don't know anything more of this. I'm just reading right here, and I'm looking for the clues of trying to explain it to me what's going on, and I'm trying to make heads or tails about why it's becoming such an issue. Because, in my mind, it's pretty simple. Land disposal laws are pretty simple. They're pretty straightforward. There shouldn't be a lot of communication breakdowns here. And I also know on the other side, where we have extensions of enactments for certain things, I talk about all these things as well. There shouldn't be no provisions that are questioning an argument at all, or a fight. And what we find that the government itself is the one that's the lackey. However, in this case, that's not such a big factor, because we find out later we're not dealing mostly in federal land. We're not dealing in anything like that. Why are the Sioux objecting? Well, that came a problem here 2 days later when I read the Laramie Treaty, because it says that they aren't to object to these things. But it says here, the tribe's basic argument, which is made to a federal judge Wednesday, this is last Wednesday, is that the regulators at the Army Corps of Engineers, is 2 Wednesdays past at least, that the regulators at the Army Corps of Engineers didn't give it enough of a chance to assess the pipeline's impact on cultural sites and the possible effects of a spill along the line. That's another flag goes up. I don't know of any, I've not seen many treaties, if there's any, I have not seen them, where they talk specifically to cultural sites. That's only in 2 other places I know of. It's in some enactments of Congress, and then it's in the UN provisions. So a flag goes up here. The tribe's basic argument is on cultural sites, which is a UN-type imposition adopted by the United States. And then there's a constitutional reason why they've allowed for that also, that I know. There's 2 provisions here in the United States. One's UN, one's not. One has to do with our Constitution, the 10th Amendment. And that, their basic argument is that the impacts upon that. Well, impacts are now focusing it down to 1 act, which becomes very interesting, because at the end of this thing, by Friday, we find out that was not even the act they used that I thought that they would be imposing based on the word impact in this report here. Next paragraph, the tribe is seeking an injunction blocking additional construction until it can make those assessments. Well, so I'm thinking now, if you're looking at impacts that have not been assessed and they're required to be assessed on the reservation there, this is before I understand that they've already given consent, and that may not even be enough at this point with the other act. But they're saying, which something we run into all the time, the government doesn't do its assessments properly. And yet, in a few days, we'll find out that's not the case either. And so I started to realize this false narrative and the false action, and they're driven by groups and attorneys that support the groups, more importantly, that know how to use these sloganeerings in order to move people herd people into places that won't benefit them in the future. I'm seeing it all right here. These few words, impacts, the term cultural sites, the fact that we're not really talking about the treaty, are we? We haven't even talked about the reservation lands. I see that now. I didn't see it Friday when I quickly read through just to try and get a handle on this. You need to understand this is how this started, all these things become very important in doing the analysis, to hold out these important omissions, these silences that are here. I'm going to go back and highlight one where, remember, they said near the tribal lands. I missed that. And I think all of us have. Everyone I've noticed has been talking about this. It ends up getting somebody arrested. It all plays out here this last week. All because no one's taking the lessons that I've been trying to show behind the woodshed to methodically and foundationally work through the problem. And so now everyone's running on emotions and feelings and whatever all else you do, causing chaos in the world and causing trouble. When these laws are literally sitting there to be worked correctly, when worked correctly will be peaceful. That I do see a potential problem with the tribe's basic argument, because if this is the case, we run into this all the time where the government doesn't listen to the things it's supposed to be doing. In other words, the law that I'm looking at, I know, and in a couple different authorities, says a meaningful consultation shall be done. In fact, the federal government, is to seek out to do so. It's in the law already. And those of you that read one of the last things that the federal government just did should kind of chuckle a bit about that then. This all ties together eventually. This story ties to the very end in the same ridiculousness that I was having problem with last Sunday, that I couldn't get more information about immediately, that bears itself out with the help of people bringing information, and I could tear into it when I had time immediately to see, okay, this is that part, this is that part, oh yeah, that's qualifying that's all qualified. This means that, oh, that's where they did it, and it all ends up being the story that I was really concerned about after I started looking at it. The next paragraph, the law, they have in brackets, the law, they're talking about the law so-called, doesn't give the tribes veto power over anything. It gives them the right to have a dialogue around their cultural heritage. Jan Hasselman, boy, wasn't that just a befitting name, Hasselman, an earth justice lawyer representing the tribe, said, quote, an injunction for us doesn't mean no pipeline. That was telltale, folks, if you don't understand what you're looking at there. Earth Justice Lawyer is an eco-terrorist organization that will come in and just use this laws. They'll get paid to do this too underneath the existing law, to destroy production over Earth. Earth becomes something that has more rights than you. Well, unless you know how to address it. And these attorneys sit there to use that, like nature's trust that they've been trying to put on everybody, like the expansion of the public trust doctrine beyond commercial ways, utilizing the university solutions networks and the dispute resolution to destroy us. When they use the word dialogue and cultural heritage, I realize this is completely UN, or it can be fit inside the only other law I know should work here. But that this was not a tribal concern now. This is someone's interpretation of what the tribe needed, but it wasn't under the treaty. Did you hear anything about the treaty? Did you hear any imperative shall stop? No, you hear this is not a veto power. And that's exactly what the administrative side of the law I figured was at play would do. You have a discussion about the impact to your cultural heritage. This is not treaty power. An injunction means no pipeline. I looked at that and said, well, then what's this thing that they say they can stop the pipeline for? This is administrative. And now the Indians themselves will have to have complied with that set of rules, or argue they were insufficient to protect them, which they haven't done either. So an earth justice lawyer, one of these special interest infiltrators, is telling the tribe what is good for them. And I can tell you on the videos I've watched about the Indians themselves at wherever they were, I can't even tell where they were. I now know a real interesting problem with where they may have been, which doesn't shine light good on them at this point. And it didn't shine light in the extension on a reporter who gets arrested. It should tell you something about what's going on, about what the wrong problems or the problems are that cause us to be wrong. The Indians themselves are not actually putting this and knowing what the underlying law is. They're being guided by people like this Hassel man, earth, justice, attorney. Not a lawyer. There's no law here at all. Beyond legal issues, though, the tribe has raised cultural objections to the pipeline, calling it the latest slight from companies and governments seeking to profit off of natural resources on or near tribal lands. I read that too fast last week. I missed the word near again, the second time. These are clues that I missed, but that are important. I'll tell you now. Again, beyond the legal issues, the tribe has raised cultural objections. That's no different than what they said in the prior paragraph. That's still in the same and different law than the treaty law. Calling it a latest slight from companies and governments. Now this brings up important points because throughout the week, everyone's bashing the corporations and the government for making this pipeline. And see, the Occupy movement allowed us to do this. We'll just bash on all the corporations because they're no good. Now, I have a slightly different view, and I've been telling you how be careful about bashing on corporations and how they work and what they work. And it's not really a problem when you understand. You just got to treat them correctly and what their purpose is. And then I noticed a little chart came out. You won't get a link to this. It went through the Twitter sphere. It was a chart of all the companies involved in energy and energy transportation and all this other stuff. And they were making, there was a dialogue about, look how infiltrated and incestuous, if you will, all these companies are to work together to rape the natural resources. When in fact, as a miner, I look at that and said, that's how you get minerals to society, to use them, consume them. And this is another hypocrisy of some sort as we continue down this path. The anti-fossil fuelers fueling an insanity. You have to have these corporations because it's like in mining and the grantee, the individual man or woman grantee. A lot of times mining is very expensive. I don't know where anybody gets this idea it's cheap. Mining is very expensive. And at some point when you move from prospect to extraction, the proper extraction method requires someone bigger than the individual grantee. Typically what they call juniors or the senior miners, the big miners, what you hear, the big miners, the corporate miners. There's a reality behind why that is. It takes that kind of organizational structuring in order to get these minerals in the quantities and efficiently enough to society. It's just the way that works. And I don't know what more to tell you about that. You're just going to maybe have to just take my word. You're going to have corporations to do big things. I know I'm pausing here because I'm getting I can just almost tell I'm getting flack from a lot of people. I don't know what it is. I start talking about some of this, I just get the feedback. I'm hoping if you'd listen, you need to put everything in. There's a reality on the ground. Get everything to the ground and it starts to make a whole lot more sense. There's laws we can really rely on if we make sure that they're done correctly. And land law is one of those things, or soil law, soil disposal, and the relationships involved in that are just powerful, powerful tools if we just start to understand that and work them correctly. So we find out there's no veto power. There's no sovereignty here in the Indians on this. I've missed the word near twice, and this becomes a big joke at some level when we see for true what's going on. We see that an earth justice attorney is pushing this thing. On the same, beyond legal, they want to make a bigger issue. It's all about cultural objections to the pipeline. Assuming it's on reservation land, and now speaking to the profit of natural resources. The profit off of these natural resources at the cost of everybody else. That's a new factor that's not actually happening. And so I'm reading this as well to see, this is the meme, this is the sloganeering building in. There are no actual natural resources involved in this. And if you notice, if you've listened to me, I've told you can't define minerals as natural resources either. Minerals are separate from natural resources. Now, I've told you the legislatures have been trying to define minerals as a natural resource, and we clearly show them every time that comes up how they're completely wrong and that definition is a fraud. I've explained it to you here. So they've added a nuance here. They've tried to expand the story beyond legal issues, and there's nothing here of any substance. It's all irrelevant if the treaty exists, and it's going to be irrelevant if there was a process that I know exists that was provided that was turned down by, that was denied by the Indians themselves, given we're talking about reservation land. She goes on to say, or the story goes on to say, in that sense, Hasselman and the tribal allies said the Standing Rock Sioux are ready to wage a more thorough protest against the project and turn it into a social justice issue. Folks, when I read that, it all went off. I don't need to read more about how wrong this is going to go. That we're in an agenda, it's going that way, the Indians haven't seen it, they've been subsumed by this thing I talked about a long time ago. And I referenced the horse. We'll get to it. I got a little definition, I'll read it to you quick and we'll move on. Whether it's the gold from the Black Hills or hydropower from the Missouri River or oil or oil pipelines that threaten our ancestral inheritance, the tribes have always paid the price for America's prosperity. Standing Sioux Chairman David Archambault II wrote in the New York Times op-ed. Well, here again, now we're going to generalities, throw the whole work together. I'm looking specifically at what's going on in this one issue. We're not talking about hydropower. We're not talking about mineral extraction in gold. We're not talking about a pipeline elsewhere. We're talking about this one. And if there was a threat, there's a process I know in the law that wasn't even created by the ancestors of the Indians and not insisted in the treaties either, that Congress provided, that is being completely dismissed here. And trying to make that balance that we're supposed to, everyone's supposed to have their part. I noticed the news was dissing on the corporations and raping the earth, and the government's screwing everybody over. And when I started reading more into the facts, it wasn't so. It hasn't been so. And I'm still listening for the substantial argument that doesn't come out of an attorney's mouth or a special interest group that's created a propaganda or psyop around this, utilizing the nature of the Indian to protect their land against them. And this is where it eventually goes. How have the pipeline supporters responded? The supporters now. Federal officials, the Dakota access developers, say they gave Standing Rock the chance to survey the pipeline's route, but the tribe declined. If that's true, folks, as I read this last Sunday, it's over. We're only talking about impacts. We're talking about that they had a duty themselves, and we all do in these processes, to show how we will be impacted. And there's a reason for all that. It's in law as well. And they say here that they declined. If that's the truth, the government has to work off the evidence of the record. If that's not the truth, that they didn't actually, there's going to be a lawsuit for the failure to fulfill the law to do that. At the end of the day, it is found that they did decline. I want to read some. I want to keep moving here. Okay, so go to the next section. That was a big deal right there. There's a whole lot of it here that were just a whole lot of information in the reading. Short sentence by short sentence to explain to us we have a problem with this issue, and it's not a story being told correctly, even though this story looks like it's telling us the truth. There's truth in this one, not in like the ones that follow this story. So I was glad to actually see this first to kind of line me in a little bit better. Otherwise, it got real messy quick to try and keep track of it all. Who else is involved in the fight? Protests against the pipeline have ballooned since the Army Corps released a major round of permits in July. Organizers see an anti-pipeline effort as wide-reaching as any since Keystone. I think we're going to find different. This is psyop. This is propaganda right here. When you find the facts of this, it's a wholly different project, a wholly different condition happened. In fact, I think the the oil companies, the oil pipeline transportation companies have figured out they've got to do things a lot different, otherwise it's just too much trouble. In fact, the judge actually identifies how they took pains to not engage the tribe. Now I bring up the word near that I overlooked here. Hundreds of people, tribal residents and fossil fuel protesters have demonstrated against the pipeline at the construction sites in North Dakota, with the state's governor declaring a state of emergency there and a federal judge issuing a restraining order against new protests. About 20 people have been arrested as part of the demonstrations. Now, it's interesting, put that on the ground. Where were they arrested becomes relevant a little bit later here. Nationally, Greens have begun mobilizing against the pipeline as well, moving beyond the basic legal questions posed by the tribe. Do you hear a problem with that? What's the treaty have to do with that, folks? Nothing. Who are these? Who's driving this? Not the tribe. What's the tribe complaining about? Cultural issues that I'm telling you is under one act of Congress, and I'll explain it here in a moment, because we haven't got to it and I didn't see it yet. I'm hoping you all come up with it, so you start realizing we're not just talking out of my opinion. There's foundational things to go to look at. And I haven't heard one bit of it mentioned yet. Not one. That's another alarm bell for me. This is again showing that the conduct that's being driven is not based in a foundation. It's probably agenda as well. The president and his administration can weigh in and take action, and they have the legal authority to call for a full environmental review of this pipeline or to halt construction by not granting permits, said Catherine Colentine, a senior campaign representative at the Sierra Club. That statement is a lie with respect to what the court says are the facts on the ground. I also realized that it would probably not be proper where they had declined and the process was given for consultation under the process I know they have to do. The only question would be, did it actually get done? The court, at the end of the day, explains that it has. So for those that have that holding out that question, let's not hold that out. Let's get to the point about understanding. There was more done right here than wrong, probably a lot done right here as part of the companies, as part of the government, to get this through where it's placed, and that's the underlying silence at this point. Where is that pipeline? Now we get the peanut gallery to step in. But a political fight could be brewing. I've told you before that production shall not suffer politics, and yet it has, and that's our problem. So you see right here that there's a continuing plan to politicize production, things that we need in our society across the board. But a political fight could be brewing too. Colonel Sanders, Senator Colonel Sanders, spoke out against the project on Thursday because the pipeline's impact on climate change. What relevance is that pipe going to something that's not even part of the discussion called climate change that this idiot brings into the fore to try and make an issue, further enlargement of the issue on? Explains to you how wrong these people are in all of this, and where this thing is going. This was taken on as an ability to expand the question, to try and bring some awareness and authority to a deception. And all you Bernie Sanders supporters are going to go rah rah, great for you, good for you, Bernie, for stepping in and putting your hat in a ring. He has no business putting it in, neither on politics or his interest there or on a fraud called climate change. That pipeline going in is not going to, climate's going to continue. Climate will change, and that change is going to continue. That pipeline go in or not. But this is how they expand the problem and keep us off the focus. It was so easy when I saw what was going on. It was what my intuition said it had to be. And it exposed everybody else that my problem, my dismay was that I haven't heard anybody else talk about this anywhere, even the people that listen to me, to expose this for themselves. And if we can't do that, we allow those that are transparent to us to affect us adversely, and we will act as if their influence is not there, and that is going to be a serious defect for us. Everyone will be hurt on this. Another peanut gallery actress, Susan Sarandon and Shailene Woodley, diehard Sanders backers during the Democratic presidential primary, headlined a rally against the pipeline in Washington this week. What is their claim to the land, and what is their set of facts that allows them to create this kind of noise and rally against the pipeline? Now, it says what's next, and it goes on and on. I could read a few more, not too much more. That was the last bit. It keeps going on. They eventually say that this Judge Boasberg will be making a decision on September 9th about the injunction. And he did so. So what have I been talking about this horse? Let's move on now. We got some basic framework about what my insight was when I saw this report, and all the flags that are waving and the alarms that are going off. And then I also want you to keep track, and I hope I haven't been too confusing, keep track of the stableness of the foundation I'm tracking with. Anything they say that's outside of that foundation, I realize is propaganda, psyop, deception, whatever you want to call it. It's not right. Yet I can keep track of the foundation of what's supposed to go on, and I can keep track of that, and that's my narrow path that walks me through this. And so as soon as we saw in the other article, we saw that there's other groups that stepped in to supposedly speak for the tribes. The term that I've been alluding to when I talked to the horse, and I hope some of you caught this and said it to yourself, the larger term is that evidences a stalking horse. I talked about this way back in 2009, how far along this stuff goes on before. It was when I first started to broadcast. I was watching how people are being taken down for their real needs are being obscured by these others that are imputed upon them by outsiders. And the people that look like they're coming to give you a hand are really there to club you in the head. And no one has recognized this. But the stalking horse I talked about is a figure that tests a concept with someone or mounts a challenge against someone on behalf of an anonymous third party. If the idea proves viable or popular, the anonymous figure can then declare its interest and advance the concept with little risk of failure. If the concept fails, the anonymous party will not be tainted by association with a failed concept and can either drop the idea completely or bide its time and wait until a better moment for launching an attack. This is a condition of the stalking horse, and it has multiple layers. I can't tell you how much more insight I have now about how this works. Understand what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people that are promoting something for someone else who actually have another agenda, who are working with third parties behind them. They're stalking horses for other stalking horses. That a principal sits back, who one moment, at one time when it's proper, steps forward, and there's multiple different reasons why they'll step forward to do certain types of multiple things, to take the ring and advance its cause, which is another deception. And if you haven't quite figured this out yet, you really have to slow down and understand when I talk about multidimensional warfare, and they tell you that this is multidimensional warfare, they're not joking. And I said that I can't even tell you how I'm here to know this, but I am here to know this. And when I saw a bunch of my friends and a bunch of people that I don't even know and a bunch of people I'll never know, and the internet's such a wonderful thing, you can just listen to all kinds of people. And I watch, they're all going down in flame because they won't do the most basic analysis and understand, take themselves out of it and understand what's going on. That even because if you don't keep going and get to the root of the condition, you're going to miss the real enemy. You're going to miss what that enemy's going to do in the future. You talk about your future generations, that's what I see. Those little ones, those people coming up, the ones that have been stripped of their capacity, their ability to have responsibility, vested in someone they go to for a decision. And typically the advice of an attorney, the one who put it on them. But it's not confined to that, it's bigger. They have been stripped of the capacity to have a say and responsibility and the memory of what that would be if they had it. That this stalking horse condition, it's at least 4 layers I can see just in this first article. But the term stalking horse is very apparent to me, whether or not people want to accept that. This is what I think. This is how I move through this. And it's gotten me from what I didn't want to get into through what no one seemed to want to really actually look at to something that is a threat to everyone. And interestingly, it's what I deal with a lot in slightly other ways. The government's an evasion of duties. It creates from these evasion issues that don't exist. And then they give the answer, the solution, the outcome that brings it to what the government needs in the future. And it's not your government, it's the usurpers in that government. It's people inside that are usurping your way of life. So in the process of trying to figure this out, I see the first article. I got no information. I think it was Gary L. that brings up the, archives.gov. So we have a somewhat of a authoritative view. I'll send those links into the chat room. The teaching with documents, the Sioux Treaty of 1868 was something that I think he brought forward. And we can read a little bit about the story of that. And then there's pictures and images that you can get, which when I looked at the images, it looked to me, we went to Article 1 on the first page and it stopped. I said, this is not, and then we had the signature page as images. And for myself, I said, well, that's got to be a longer document. That's not the full images. No, I didn't go back in. I just immediately, I don't have the time to ferret the stuff out. So I just said, okay, what's this treaty say? Let's go find it. Let's find the text of it. Let's go qualify the text of it that's consistent across the board on a couple of sources I can trust even as a rewrite is correct. Let's do the analysis to make sure they're consistent. If they're consistent, let's just go with it. So I didn't go to the depth of having to pull out the original documents. I could care less, but the images were not sufficient. And so I went and did a little more digging and then found out that I did my analysis. I found Article 10.6 shows us that there's a consent in the treaty for utilities and necessities, which would include that pipeline, given it's on the reservation. And I'm thinking at this time it is, that I think Gary L. also found the text on the same website of the source documents that then I said, okay, this looks to be identically what Avalon has. I'll just go with what I said before. And I looked at the treaty and I said, this is not a treaty issue. When you look at the treaty and there's reservations, well, here, I'll read it to you. Article 11, in consideration of the advantages and benefits conferred by this treaty and many pledges and friendship by the United States. I know you're laughing. Some of you are laughing and joking. This is not, I understand how ironic that sounds, but we have to separate what this issue is over the dastardly deeds underneath the illusion of that, so that we can understand how this works and how we can work it better, so those things never happen again. And we extricate ourselves from the deception. So, the friendship by the United States, and I have to say something, the ancestors of the tribes did not do for themselves what Congress ends up doing back in 1968. For everyone. But that was a constitutional obligation that they recognized. So, the friendship by the United States, the tribes who are parties to this agreement hereby stipulate that they will relinquish all right to occupy permanently the territory outside. Their reservations are herein defined, but yet reserve the right to hunt on any lands north of the North Platte and on the Republican Fork of the Smoky Hill River, so long as the buffalo may range thereon, in such numbers as to justify the chase. These are all stipulated clauses executed together that have to be there to work and to be functioning. You're watching fairly concise statements here of condition. They are relinquishing certain things here in this paragraph, and they're agreeing to some reservations and some other implied internal reservations. So the concept of reservation is not foreign. And there's a whole other part of me that wants to say some other things, but I got to keep focusing on this issue with these words, and because ultimately we're going to get to the point that these words are really irrelevant to the whole process, but they're very instructive. So they've also made a reservation of lands that on lands that they don't accept, that are not in their territory, for their happy hunting grounds, so long as there's buffalo for a chase. Now that brought up a whole other thought, get me off the track, but you start seeing a different and more sinister dynamic. But for the purpose of this treaty, on this project, we keep going. And they, the said Indians, further expressly agree. I want to just jump down into the 6th. They withdraw all pretense of opposition to the construction of a railroad now being built along the Platte River and westward to the Pacific Ocean, and they will not in future object to the construction of railroads, wagon roads, mail stations, or other works of utility or necessity, which may be ordered or permitted by the laws of the United States. I'm pausing so you can think very deeply about that extension to works of utility or necessity. You will withdraw all pretense of opposition to the construction of other works of utility or necessity. I've told you about the word necessity. When I read that, I said it's over. It's over for any objection. Now what they'll do is they'll reduce to we get to the equity between the parties in their ability to do so. That's the easement over that land and on the reservation. This is on the reservation, understand. Get it to the ground. But I'll read the rest so that you don't think I'm hiding anything here. But it's kind of water under the bridge for our discussion. But should such roads or other works to be constructed on lands of their reservation, the government will pay the tribe whatever amount of damage may be assessed by the 3 disinterested commissioners to be appointed by the president for that purpose. One of the said commissioners to be a chief of the headman of the tribe. Folks, that is what I know in soil disposal as the support of the dominant estate to the surface estate. And that has always been a liability of a dominant estate, mineral estate, dominant lower estate, to support the surface. And what we're liable to as mining or dominant estate possessors is to support the uses and enjoyments of the surface. And if there's any plants that are commercial, production, not really commercial, but production, you pay for it. If there's buildings, you pay for it. If you interfere, you pay for it. It's all reduced to $1, if you will. Notwithstanding that other argument. I don't want to get lost on all these side discussions. So you see they're only being granted the surface on top of this. And there's an agreement on how that compensation is going to be made. Did you hear compensation or this mechanism being triggered in the first story? No. When I saw that, I said this is totally not in the treaty. Otherwise, they'd be wondering where their commission was. If they can figure out the disinterested commissioners for the value of the thing that's being destroyed at the surface, given they can't avoid it. This is all just laid down soil disposal, land interaction, owner interaction law. If you want to see some of that, I told you before, get over to Jefferson Mining District, go look for important cases on the right-hand side. There's a little button, go down to, some distance, find important cases, click that, get on over and find the Menard Run oil. You'll see the government itself having title in the Allegheny Mountain area in Pennsylvania, I believe it is somewhere back there. And you'll see that even when the government had title, it didn't have more power than the dominant estate owner had to go in, and the only thing that the dominant estate owner had to give was surface support. In other words, support whatever gets broken because of the need to go get the minerals. You see, this treaty explains there's a separation of the estate right here. Notwithstanding, let's move on. So, in the treaty, there's already been a ceding of the authority for necessity or work utility. That immediately triggered to me, this is not a treaty issue. Otherwise, they would have talked about that. They would have mentioned the authority and moved on. I said, this is not even a treaty issue. So I'm now focusing back on this other act, the one that's been writing in my mind about the administrative side of this, the thing that the ancestors of the Indians did not even for themselves reserve. Where they did reserve the hunting grounds, they did not reserve any other thing, such as being talked about today by the attorneys. I'm not making a judgment on any of this. I'm just telling you what the facts are that lay out. So we got another story here comes through. North Dakota pipeline to halt temporarily after the tribe's protest. So now we got people, the people who support the Indians all rallying around, great, we got to stop them, and then the other people saying, no, the companies are, oh, we got to stop, and everyone's getting into this fervor over totally irrelevant things. And you got to see how these decisions are being made. I think I'm watching a bunch of people that really don't want to make an insult to anybody, but they also realize that there's a law that's being ignored. And what I see is a bunch of propaganda to make it be ignored. And I see further to my disappointment, a lot more people agreeing with the to ignore that and to go with the sloganism. A pipeline company agreed to halt until Friday construction of an oil pipeline in parts. I reported on this, I think, or I made a comment to this as well, that they agreed to stop this voluntarily. Where an Native, and this is important because it comes up with the judges, or the answer after the judge does not allow an injunction to stop this, which everyone, you're going against the Indians and their rights. Well, if you read the order, it doesn't. Absolutely doesn't. It's a shocker to me. It was just like, wow, no wonder the treaty's not involved. A pipeline agreed to be halted by the companies themselves. It has been, where the Native American tribe says it has ancient burial and prayer sites, a lawyer for the company said. Well, it's going to be interesting when you get on the ground where those prayer sites are, and what the Indians themselves, I saw in a video, understand is the mechanism now, where they are, now is not in federal authority to look at. And they know that's the case. And so I started seeing a bunch of people that are either disconnected from their own, the thing they already know, even though they're like wielding a gun that they don't even know is it's like giving a kid a gun, as far as I can see, or they know exactly what they're doing. And it's still a setup. It's a setup that's going to hurt everybody. Whether by ignorance or intention, folks, we're going to be hurt. After violent clashes over the weekend between protesters and security officers near the construction site, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, a neighboring Native American tribe, had asked the United States District Court for the District of Columbia on Sunday for a temporary restraining order across the Dakota access. Well, interestingly, they added for the District of Columbia because when you read the treaty, the Laramie Treaty or the Sioux Treaty of 1868, it directs the parties to any issue to that court. So for everything I've said in the past, generally for Article 3 matters, in their agreement, they have to go to this court. That is the court of competent jurisdiction. So when I got to the order, I looked immediately at the court that answered, and it's that court, the one that's in the treaty. I still had another question, because if we're not in the treaty, then what court do they go to? But I'm not going to get too deep on that part. I'm looking for what the facts are, that nobody, everything I'm seeing is going contrary to what my intuition is saying it has to go by, and everybody else that I notice is all rah-rah or getting into the roller coaster ride that's been prepared for y'all. My roller coaster ride was finding out how unaware, because of the facts. As each fact came, my roller coaster ride was a new awareness ride of more comprehension of what was going on. I was like almost like a mountain climb. And anybody that would take this journey would find these things, I'm sure, whether your opinion on how you describe it is different, you would have to find the facts as they were. We could not look at something from the same perspective and come to a different agreement. It's not like I'm looking at the car from the top and you're looking at it from the bottom. I guess that's a possibility, but at some point we'd have to find that fact out. That'd be the missing fact we'd find out, and then we'd say, oh, we're just looking at the same thing from different perspectives. We're still looking at the same thing. And in soil disposal considerations, That's pretty a fact-based analysis. It's not a question like I've been watching everybody make out of all this, riding the emotional roller coaster about what has to happen here. Really have taken a dispassionate position. And I've told you before, every fact can mean a complete difference, and the punchlines for me were written all in that order, which caused me to have to go look again. I couldn't believe what I was reading compared to the propaganda that had been going on the whole time. So they all wait for this judge to make a decision on this last Friday. Well, right as that's happening, we heard before, as a continuation, the North Dakota governor activates the National Guard against the pipeline protest. And I'm thinking, wow, this is, and everyone, you jump on this, it's the government coming down thuggery-like. But it starts to make a little more sense when you understand the facts on the ground. And when you understand you're being deceived about what you've been told. And so this organization here, that anti-media, I'm a little disappointed in this as well, because they highlighted all the wrong things, no different than anybody else who was trying to push an agenda. I don't know that these people are that connected to become an agenda promoter, but they did by reflex action through prejudice. They highlighted this part. Over the weekend, peaceful protesters turned violent after security guards from G4S, a British mercenary group, unleashed dogs on the demonstrators, provoking the confrontation. The media spun as violently aggressive on the part of those protesting. What a false statement that ends up being, even if G4S was involved. But look at all the trigger words that they got you, social justice warriors and deniers, that they used all over you right there. So I'm getting a better idea about this. I look at this story and said, this is you want to talk about alternative media? Are you kidding me? This is feeding right into the disinfo. When you find out where those people were protesting, it's no different in my mind as what I was telling you the Sugar Pine mine miners did to call in the Oath Keepers. And I want you to think a little bit about that, and I'm going to keep moving on. Think about that. What kind of a land then are we talking about these protesters are on? We're assuming it's the reservation. I've told you the treaty doesn't apply even if it was on the reservation. So what is going on here? Now, so I was disappointed in the propaganda being pushed, what was called antimedia.org, doing just copying and pasting the memes that are thrown in to the trigger words that everyone goes off on. Oh, corporations, British mercenary group, a G4S. Yeah, I know all the stories about all that. I know the truths of those things as well that we see actually working in the world. But in context of this, when you place this problem on the ground under the foundation of the law and apply it correctly, it makes a lot of sense why those dogs were there. And maybe I don't agree that they should have been unleashed. But I wasn't there, so I don't know what kind of protection had to go on. I also understand that, there's a lot of incompetence here. And let me give it another point. If it's found that it's not on the reservation, who's at fault? Who's the violent ones? Who's the aggressor? And if this was treaty bound, wasn't there an agreement to not be violent at all and go to Washington? We're going to find out, even in the videos that I saw, that this was not even on the reservation. Oh, I just let one out. One little clue out. What? You say? Yeah, all the news out there, everybody was saying it's implying it's on the reservation. Yet remember, I said I even missed the word near twice in the first article. National Guard to provide assistance to officers at pipeline. Now the government's got a problem. They have to call the National Guard out because they've got an insurrection going on that's not supposed to be happening in the foundations of the law. The government has the duty to protect this thing. The government has the duty to protect the company. Whatever else your opinion is, I can now see an absolute duty to keep the peace. Now the government has to come out. Everyone knows, again, another dastardly mean. If you put the National Guard out, which I know that we know the history. Ohio State comes to my mind. I saw the pictures of a little kid, okay? Yes, it's not cool. But in this case, it's gotten so kind of out of hand, they've got to maintain a presence, and they have to tell you they're not going to take the frontline presence. They're going to step in behind the officers and then also just give a presence so that those officers can go do their job, go in and ripping you off, serving you with process to get you into their courts so they're going to continue their revenue enhancement. But they had to come out specifically to say, we're not going out with the National Guard to come thump on y'all. And yet, when you look at the facts on the ground, this may have been a proper concern, and it was all caused by the protesters. Now, another thing that caused me a concern as far as who was driving all this stalking horse issue, using the Indian cause, the Indian needs, they're fabricated as well through the eyes of the attorneys to drive this thing in because they're doing a psyop here. They're pushing an agenda. They're trying to get notoriety. They're trying to get people to go certain ways and understand certain things, the things they're telling you. Then right at the last moment, the Yankton Sioux tribe files a federal lawsuit to stop the pipeline as well. Now, not to disregard any right that they actually have. Understand, I'm not taking any judgments, and I'm not imposing anything on anybody or taking anything away. But when they came in at the last second and they used the similar arguments, they were adjusted just a little bit. I said, this Indian tribe is being used as well. This is how you progress in a war. You keep bringing things, throw things at the problem. Well, we're going to make more validity in the people's mind by bringing another lawsuit. But when they look at the lawsuit, it's not much different. It now incorporates the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. We have another agency that should have been involved in the meaningful process that's in the law, that's already mandated in law to happen. And I looked at that and I said, this looks like a maneuver here. They're just throwing another court case at it to make it look as if there's more things that's going on. But now they mention some things here. The Yankton's complaint includes claims under the National Historic Preservation Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Administrative Procedure Act. Well, the last one is how this all goes down, so let's just move that out. Clean Water Act is because of the Oahe Lake, apparently, and or the Missouri. Remember, the Missouri is a navigable river. Forget that for the point of anybody owning it. And so that was another thing that I picked up on pretty quickly. But let me get to the point. National Historic Preservation Act. I didn't understand that was viable to the Indians. And guess what? We're going to find out to be the truth. What I had been focused on all the way since last Sunday, and you should too, because of the impacts part, because of the cultural sites, because of the opportunity under administrative law for consultation. I hope anybody that's been listening to me has picked up already that the National Environmental Policy Act was the act that they should have come under, that provided for the right of dialogue, if I can say it that way, consultation. It's the same thing I tell you that the government and the Jefferson Mining District uses to go into to do coordination authorized under a different law. That the NEPA is the standard of analysis that has to be done by whom? The government. Now, they mentioned the National Environmental Policy Act, but you never heard it before. And in fact, we find out that the first pipeline case that went into Washington did not use it either. So here we have another awareness to I'm shifting awareness. I'm stepping up the mountain a little bit more. They didn't even use the tool that they had that they ought to have used. That now looks back on the attorneys. Those people just will mess you up every chance they get. Stalking horse, false claim, move this to an agenda. They don't even use in the first suit, the one that's being decided on last Friday, the National Environmental Policy Act. I didn't know that until I read the memo, or the opinion. My mouth is agape. If you can, yes, maybe that was something you shouldn't have to think about. But I'm looking at this saying, no, that you should have brought that, and then you should have brought proof that they failed somehow. But we got a clue that wasn't the case they could do, and they don't, because they did get the opportunity and they denied engagement. And then we find out possibly why. Remember that word near that I missed twice. Where is this actually happening? We've assumed it's on the res. And don't ever forget, you think I'm forgetting that we have another authority, another wise man who observed, we all live on the res. You hear me talk about it in different ways all the time. The tribe's lawsuit highlights the Corps' blatant failure to engage in consultation as required by federal laws and regulations, as well as the Corps' own policies. Did you hear any mention of a treaty here, folks? See, by now I'm realizing why there's no treaty, and as I said early on, this is not in the treaty. The treaty itself wouldn't allow these authorities. There's only one remaining thing in place I know that it is, and it's the National Environmental Policy Act. There's special rules for tribes. In fact, there's special rules in the government. You have to know this. Every agency has special rules for the tribes in dealing with tribal considerations. They're distinct and different from coordination. They're no less. But they only, and this whole process will not allow you to veto anything. It goes underneath a different standard. It's called the standard of practicability. Did the government do what all was practicable to avoid an impact? It's a completely different standard. So you don't have a veto power. You have that witness power that they are doing everything they can to avoid impacting you. This is the environment of mankind versus the environment, the natural environment. You'll see these words right in the NEPA. This is why I tell you the terms, not just dictionary words, the terms and understanding where they are in law is all important to understand the terrain you're in. Should I go more? I could read all this. I need to keep moving on as this time just ticks, doesn't it? They complain that they didn't get an opportunity. So let's move on because this comes in late. I thought this sounded to me like a maneuver. It was trying to make an impression on people, like there was some kind of right. The media is saying that there's the government is, the tribes are winning because the protest is causing this. They're causing unity in the tribes. And folks, I could not be sadder to watch this for the tribes, the people, and everyone. See, I don't necessarily think that. I know there's difference in rights and we have different lands and we can designate it, but we're all the same people. We're all people. And if I expect something from me, I expect it for you, or if I expect that you get it, that I should get it equally, given that we have the similar rights to certain places. And that's why I didn't get into this, is that tribal lands are not my land. I have no say. I know in the law there's plenty of law for the tribes to speak up. I understand the condition of the stalking horse corporate structure overriding the people of the tribes, that the people themselves are not stopping. But in this case, it starts to become very clear that the tribes are being played into their sense of empowerment because they think they're special and different and have a sovereignty that's being executed when it's actually an administrative function. You've never heard any in this discussion that the treaty was powerful at all. And I told you, if you go read the treaty as I read to you, nothing in the treaty precludes the pipeline. And then it gets worse as far as what's been going on there and what's on the ground and in the ground. I move now to the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, exactly where the treaty itself says they would go if they're going to have a question, an issue before the court to be decided. And the court starts out with this atrocity that's been visited upon the Indians. I find a problem here because it doesn't say how they have jurisdiction to do so. I wish they would have, because I would have understood real quickly whether or not it was partly that treaty or whether or not they just chose to go in there because this was just an administrative function of the federal government, administration in their venue. See, I have a different analysis I'm doing all the time. And so they talk about the atrocities visited upon the Indians to open up this thing, which I found troubling, to say the least, because that's irrelevant to the point. And he explains that the fears of construction of the pipeline, and then they said this is the point. And more specifically, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe has sued the United States Army Corps of Engineers to block the operation of Corps' permitting for the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL. The tribe fears that construction of the pipeline which runs within a half a mile of its reservation in North and South Dakota. Can I repeat that for you? Listen. Which runs within a half a mile of its reservation in North and South Dakota, will destroy its cultural and historical significance. This isn't even on the reservation, folks, for which the treaty would be a part. Just as my intuition told me, the impacts they're going to speak to have to be brought out of the NEPA, which has a consultation program, which the rules of every agency make special rules for the tribes to give their the needs and values, as it says in there, their needs and values and laws that need to be respected, like the treaties and all that, come to bear within their treaty rights through NEPA, by the rules of the federal government to do so. It's all there. In fact, I look at what the tribe has extended to look at, see if whether or not a county can adjust it. And the only difference and distinction is really the treaties for the land that they're under. So it's really relative to the things of tribal concern or the things of county concern and their relative jurisdictions. It's not that complicated. So this pipeline runs within a half a mile of the reservation, not on the reservation. Then it says, it has now filed a motion of preliminary injunction, the tribe has, asserting principally that the Corps flouted its duty to engage in tribal consultation under the National Historic Preservation Act, and the irreparable harm will ensue. Irreparable harm is something you claim for an injunction. It's just part of the formality, but they bring up the National Historical Preservation Act, folks. I told you the act they ought to have brought up was the NEPA. This court comes down and says that there's no remedy underneath the National Historic Preservation Act. Now I look at the attorneys, who should know better. And I'm not saying that they would even have a remedy under NEPA right here, because we will hear that the court explains that the pipeline companies took great pains to go to the tribal people responsible. I think a woman named Young, I could be wrong. You can read it all yourself. I'm trying to paraphrase this because time goes so quick, and I was trying to find a highlighter last night. I had to do all this, and I just couldn't pull it up, so I could kind of quickly go through this. But it says that they were given the opportunity, they were given the absolute right to any information about the pipeline, the center line, so that they could look and see whether or not it would interfere with what they thought they had right to underneath NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act. And they declined, the Indians declined, the Indian leader, whoever she was, declined further consultation. That's the finding of the court. Now, I'm blind. I'm behind the woodshed. I got to read through all this document and try to weed through it. To tell you the truth, I'm feeling pretty good. I think I did all right, at least for my interpretation on how this normally works with what I do daily. In dealing with this kind of nonsense, it's brought in on us and takes away our rights, whether we be the Indian, the producer, the people, the property owner, against this agenda that sits there to run, to take us by the nose and lead us into the water and drown us. So, the National Historical Preservation Act will be found to not allow a remedy or a provision for harm. The court goes on, after digging through a substantial record on expedited basis, which we know the court's going quickly to look at this, and he's leaving himself an out to maybe he missed something. The court cannot concur with that invocation of the National Historic Preservation Act. It concludes the Corps has likely complied with the NHPA and that the tribe has not shown it will suffer injury that would be prevented by an injunction the court could issue. The motion will thus be denied. Folks, that first page, notwithstanding that there's the name of the tribe is Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, that first page says that the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe has no standing, has no right to bring the suit. The property is not on the reservation. There is nothing in the laws that the law it invoked to bring it relief. And I think the court's a bit dismayed that they didn't bring the National Environmental Policy Act, nevertheless of which says that the agencies did what they could when the Indians did not further ask and integrate with the pipeline, which was purposefully set on private land. Private land. This is a half a mile away from the reservation on private land. So when you have the equipment that's been granted that on the private land that they've paid for, the property owners there have been paid for this pipeline to go through their land, and you go there and start painting their equipment and getting all over in their face, you think you might be trespassing, folks. The other thing this report does is, I'm not coming to it quick, is I believe it was unfortunate. The judge likens this to being at the doorstep of the reservation. Now, I don't know about you, but someone that's at my doorstep, if they don't belong there, they're probably out a few more feet, or they're drug in and dealt with if they find to be a threat to me. Maybe my dog's got him by the leg, if I had a dog. Maybe they just got a bunch of flowers that I can smell. But to tell me that somebody's at my doorstep and then finding out that if I went to the corner of my property, like I went to the corner of this reservation, and when you go and you see the map of this and you go to the corner of that reservation where that pipeline is, to say that this pipeline's on my doorstep was an unfortunate statement, twice at least that he made. Because this pipeline is within a half a mile, but it's quite a ways away. It's not really close by relative to a doorstep. Relative to an adjoining property, it's not even that necessarily. It says, in fact, the DAPL needs almost no federal permit of any kind because 99% of its route traverse private land. This completely was confirmed in a video I saw of the young Indian people in a video talking about what's going on, and they knew that some property owner had said that there was a burial site on their private property, and they knew they had to go to the state now to deal with this. See, once land is disposed, it's dealt with by the state. It falls out of federal purview. That they planned this route, as straight as it looked like it was, to traverse the private land, which means every property owner was met and agreed to payment, which they'll tell you here in this order as well. There was no federal authority except over a couple of small areas. One significant exception, however, concerns constructive activity in federally regulated waters at hundreds of discrete places along the private route. The Corps needed to permit this activity under Clean Water Act or the Rivers and Harbors Act. That was the Act of 1899. I use that to show you what a dredge is all about and what a dredge project is and how it doesn't affect miners and grantees, how these are channeled relocation and navigation facilities. And sometimes both needed to be consulted, this law. For DAPL, accordingly, it permitted these activities under general permit known as a National Permit 12. The tribe alleges the Corps violated multiple federal statutes in doing so, including the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. In its complaint, the tribe asserts that the DAPL permitting threatens its environmental and economic well-being as well as its cultural resources. Do you understand that's the three-legged stool of the UN, folks? We're so far outside of treaty lands here, it's not even funny. We're outside, actually, of the law itself. And this is advanced by these attorneys that are purporting to do the Indians' needs, which I completely cannot see here at all. And they're being told what the law is, how the attorneys really mess them up here. As I said earlier, the special interest that's involved is going to mess this up for everybody. But there's a bigger game going on, so we haven't really We've hit a couple punchlines here. It was on private land. It wasn't a federal project. They did all their permitting that they needed to do. It was done under general permits because of the dangers and impacts that they had on record were not sufficiently put before them to see, and history, the general history of things will suffice to allow these types of permits. None of this, apparently, with the processes that were offered, was found by the court to be lacking. But we have people coming in driven by attorneys over the three-legged stool of the UN. Environment, economic, and social and cultural resources. That's social, folks. Social justice. It's not tribal stuff at all. I really get kind of angry a bit about this for the Indian people that really may not understand how this is really being worked against them. Because again, it's just more people that are being taken behind a woodshed in a way that they should have been doing the reverse. They are being taken advantage of. We all are being taken advantage of. And the punchline gets even better as we move in through this, not just this, what happens after this proves the whole thing I've been saying as far as getting you back to the stalking horse. So the very first page, see, this is a 58-page decision. And I suppose the judge was keen to make sure he explained everything. But when he found that there was no ability underneath the one act that the Indians had brought, the attorneys actually had brought, that means they had no standing. He could have stopped, the order stopped at page 1. It would have been that short. I've seen orders in 2 sentences that would have taken care of that. But this is a political discussion, and he's not necessarily that his decision is a political, but he's got to show all this because there's a politics and agenda behind this, and he knows fully well that he's up against that. He's got to justify now every aspect of this. And so we see this now causes a big waste of time and expense on the so-called taxpayers, that this court has to waste its time, that it can't just say there's no standing. It has to engage the deception by trying to clearing up how the deception occurs. The court goes on to say here, it bears noting that the tribe does not press its environmental claims under NEPA here. Nor does it seek a preliminary injunction to protect itself from potential environmental harms that might arise from having a pipeline at its doorstep. The unfortunate reference. I don't consider this at the doorstep. You may think differently. I don't think it's at the doorstep. I don't think you could throw a rock from the corner of your property to hit this thing. It's close. I mean, it's within a half a mile, right? But it's not next. It's not even threatening the property itself. But anyway, notwithstanding, he tells us NEPA was supposed to be invoked, and it wasn't. Instead, the tribe asserts, this is the attorneys know, the tribe's not really doing much here, I don't think, actually. Sadly. And I think if they were actually engaged, they wouldn't be here on this fight. They would be somewhere else. There's much bigger problems with the Indian condition that need to be fought than made up, agenda-driven, international usurpation of everyone's rights. Understand this is underpinning the process, the judiciary, on how you protect yourself that's being subverted here. Instead, says that the tribe asserts only the pipeline construction activity, specifically the grading and clearing, will cause irreparable injury to historical cultural properties of great significance. The statutes and permitting scheme involved in the motion are undeniably complex. The court first sets forth the operation of the NHPA, which the tribe asserts is violated. Next explains the Clean Water Act and Rivers Act and under the Corps' permitted NAPL activities. A subsequent section lays out the factual and legal proceedings that have taken place thus far. So he sets this up for us really well, and he goes through and talking about all these things. And he shows you, as you look through this, how this injunction really is not proper. It's not properly placed. It was brought with an incorrect proof, if any, and had nothing that the court could remedy if it had proof. That when I start reading this, I'm way beyond propaganda, I'm way beyond anti-media, I'm way beyond alternative media, I'm way beyond MSN and they're not covering it. I'm way beyond blaming the corporations or even the government at this point. This is in a subject matter that I have to deal with well, it's in my mind on a daily basis, and we deal with it periodically through our communications from Jefferson Mining District to the governments. The other governments, I should say. The court goes through and shows line by line how everything was worked out pursuant to the law. Where he's already stated that they have not brought a cause, he still goes through and takes great pains to say how this has not been violated. And it just occurred to me, I don't know if I can find the point. I'm going to have to do a quick search if I can get to that. And it's it was astonishing to me because I didn't know something going on. Here it is. And I'm going to jump down to it. The court is explaining how all this is going down. And then I come to this paragraph. On top of the fact it's not on the reservation, the NEPA would apply had they sued under NEPA where there was a failure of consultation that's proven to be in the record to have happened and denied. The Indians just denied. I assume it was because of this thing is coming through without being on their reservation, and they don't have on the reservation an impact that would happen from something that was even within a half a mile to assert. So they decided not to do any of it. The company goes on here, one of these pages of 14, I think. The company also opted to build a new pipeline along a well-trodden ground wherever feasible. The company opted to build its new pipeline along a well-trodden ground wherever feasible. So this is setting up the plan on how they've planned out how they're going to do this. Well-plotted land doesn't sound like unused virgin land here, folks. Where this surveying revealed previously unidentified historic and cultural resources, talking about a survey for historical purposes by the state. This is not just happening and exploiting everybody. There's a big, long process that's going on here, I see. Revealed previously unidentified historical and cultural resources that might be affected. The company mostly chose to reroute. That happens way before this is in the plan, the court is finding. In North Dakota, for example, the cultural surveys found 149 potentially eligible sites. These are potentially eligible. Okay, err on the side of caution, but I don't think you'd want to be brought into court on a potential violation of law. But they reroute anyway. The pipeline workspace en route was modified to avoid all 91 of these stone features and all but 9 of the other previously eligible sites. But by the time the company finally settled on the construction path, then the pipeline route had been modified 140 times in North Dakota alone to avoid potential cultural resources. Which this will find that they went to the tribe to ask, do you have any resources that we might affect? And they didn't want to, they had nothing to contribute. The plan had also been in place to mitigate any effects on the other 9 sites through coordination with the South Dakota SHPO, which is the Historical Preservation Officers. Coordination. This is specific to NEPA. All told, the company surveyed nearly twice as many miles in North Dakota as the 357 miles that would eventually be used for the pipeline. The company opted to build its new pipeline along well-trodden ground wherever feasible. Around Lake Oahe, for example, the pipeline will track, folks, listen, this is a shocker to me. I hadn't heard anybody talk about this, and I was wondering why then. Boy, what a propaganda psyop this ends up being with this little proof. Around Lake Oahe, for example, the pipeline will track both the North Border gas pipeline, which was placed into service in 1982, and an existing overhead utility line. It's going to be placed next to an existing pipeline. Did you know there was a pipeline there already, folks? It's already in service since 1982. In other words, there's a utility easement already across this path for the most part, apparently. In fact, where it crosses Lake Oahe, DAPL is 100% adjacent and within 22 to 300 feet from the existing pipeline. Dakota Access chose this route because these locations had been disturbed in the past, both above and below ground level, making it a, quote, brownfield crossing location. This made it less likely then that the new ground disturbances could harm intact cultural or tribal features. Now, there's probably more to go. I'm going to stop right there. There's already a pipeline. They're following and paralleling where they can this existing utility easement called the brownfield crossing location. It's across private land being paid to the private property owners. I want to know, folks, what right do anybody, be it Indians or anybody, to interfere with the other property owner's agreement with a company that come in and made these discussions and paid them or planned to pay them? What right do I have at all to make an imposition and go to where the equipment is on private land? I don't know of any, folks. MarkOnTheBeach.yahoo.com. You have to try and explain it. This is why I wasn't going to get involved in it. But the Indians have their own land. If it's affecting them, they have all the power. And then we find it's not on their land, and they're going from their land over to the equipment, no matter when it was put there or for whatever reason, as long as it's doing a construction. Because I've heard a little bit of concern over the fact that they found a burial ground on private land again, and so the company jumped equipment over there to start working. Yes, I don't like to hear that either. But guess what? If it wasn't known before and no bones were actually dug up or the Indians didn't grab some, and the state is involved here anyway, there was prior permission given by this long-standing process that had been going on. That this court record shows us a whole lot of stuff I didn't even have a clue over. I didn't know there was an existing pipeline. I didn't know there was a utility easement already going through here. And they were taking great pains to make sure that they didn't cause any disturbance. That I certainly have to now look at when I'm hearing people on the ground talking about doing non-violent lawful activity is completely dashed here. These are, if you go off, if the people that were there calling themselves the tribe got off their reservation to go over to the private property, they're trespassers. And then I looked, after I started to realize I didn't know where this pipeline, I was thinking it was over the reservation the entire time. It took me half an hour, I don't know why it took so long, a half an hour to find a good map that showed a close-up picture of where this pipeline was relative to the reservation. And as soon as, and I realized why I couldn't find one. They don't want you to see this. When you realize where the pipeline is relative to this point, this one arbitrary, almost arbitrary looking point in the reservation, you realize how stupid this whole thing is, how deceptive the propaganda has been to make it appear as if this is reservation land being affected. One map picture told me the story. I wish I'd have seen this last Sunday. I got that link for you too. So I want to bring back the concept of the stalking horse. We have a bunch of third-party interlopers in here with a special agenda using the Indian cause, such that they thought they had, fabricating one, getting the Indian people all fired up over things that were not substantial. Actually, contrary to what the ancestors actually made treaty for, if it was on the land. And I don't think I'm blaming any of the Indian people. I look at America, we're a bunch of ignorant people, period. We're duped. We're dupeable, and this proved it. And my dismay and astonishment is that I've been talking for many years now to identify this, and I don't know that anybody did. Well, except for myself. And at that point, I don't know I just decided today I was just going to go through the object lesson of how we were duped and where this thing might be going. So here's what the stalking horse says that I didn't read. I'm going to go on and I'm going to preface this because I'm going on to something that happens right after this judge's decision that points out It's not on the reservation. The treaty has nothing to do with it. Has nothing to do with the National Preservation Act, which I already knew. I didn't understand why they were bringing that and not NEPA. He questions why they didn't bring NEPA. That said, they still went through the consultation process required by NEPA to look over the impacts. Didn't find anything. They showed that there's great pains taken in order to try and avoid a lot of altercation, which I think was smart anyway. They're learning something. These big corporations and profiteers. It doesn't have anything to do with natural resources, except for maybe the transmission, which is in commerce now. That's not a natural resource either, in commerce, in transportation, in the pipeline. Whole different authorities going on here. But here's what it goes down to the stalking horse. So I got a wiki. Okay, blame me for going there, but I find it interesting to find the information all in one spot. Gives you an idea. Here's what starts to happen, and I start to believe that this is really a stalking horse issue, and we're all being duped by what we believe, and don't go to the facts, and don't get the foundation, and don't use the laws, and don't apply things, and don't really look at things in honesty and truthfulness, and try to put on what we think should be happening instead of what is actually happening. This stalking horse concept, where it uses cover of other people to cover some agenda coming in as they are the shield for your cause. In other words, carbon taxation, UN agenda, 21 sustainable development coming through the cause of the Indian, and actually not actually doing the Indian cause, is a stalking horse in the Indian. Then I said, watch out, you got a stalking horse in the green group pushing the sustainable development of the UN and or the federal government itself. So here's something that comes up in the stalking horse decision that you could read for yourself if you went there and had a thought to read there. In the event of a failure, the anonymous party is seen as being sufficiently powerful. The anonymous party, and I'm telling you, we don't know who the anonymous party is until they step forward. The anonymous party in a failure is seen as being sufficiently powerful by the ones being used as a stalking horse, which I think then takes the Indians out. And if the Indians are not taking out, then you got a corporate Indian structure that knows and defeating their own people. That needs to be fixed. But if they're in ignorance of this process and being used, and who doesn't want help? I'm not in judgment here at all. And I hope you go away with that. I hope you haven't turned off because you think I'm insulting anybody. I'm trying to show you there's a reality of how we are defeated every turn. I want that to stop. I mean, I'm embarrassed for those that, in the way the Indians have been treated by what I thought was supposed to be honorable. We see that's a total lie. And so this is on all of us to fix. And I see this failure going down. I see a 99.999 fine going down the tubes with this whole story. And it's right here to see. And markonthebeachhour.com, if you're going to go through a different proof and find the Indians had more rights than they actually have here, I need to see that. That this was a legitimate thing, I have to see that. Because right here it says that the anonymous party behind all, the ultimate of being sufficiently powerful, the ones that are the stalking horses in front are looking back to the one that's the actual anonymous party and saying, they're big enough and bad enough to protect the horses. I'll say horses, it says horse here. The anonymous party is seen as being sufficiently powerful to protect the horse from any real retribution on the part of the target, particularly since the anonymity will allow the third party to step in and pretend to be an honest broker between the horse and the target. I'm talking about the herd of horses and the target. This is further opportunity to enhance the reputation of the third party and boost their status at the expense of the target. If the exercise is viable, the third party gains power immediately. But even if it fails, it engineers an opportunity to resolve a stalemate and enhance the contender's reputation, so that ultimate success is another step nearer to the benefit of both the third party and the horse who expects to slipstream in the wake. Now I want to take the tribe out for a moment. I want to bring up the green groups who are working for sustainable development to press the agenda put in 1992 by a Republican, for all you people that think that this is inert, about sustainable development and enforce the UN Biodiversity Treaty and other things. Okay, did I go too fast and too far for everybody? Stalking horse is the green groups being used as another stalking horse, the Indians. The attorneys are sitting in there as well, I think, as another promoter of it all. Ultimately, the one most powerful is the government who can step up even in the face of a loss and protect all the horses and improve its position, thereby allowing all the horses to slipstream through and get at least what they think they were getting. And for the Indians, they'll be promised something. That right after that decision, I don't know, it was hours, folks. You got to understand that there's got to be a plan behind this when it happens this fast. United States government steps in after judge rules against Standing Rock Sioux. Now, this I thought was a propaganda piece, but it tells us the condition. But it was another pumping of the people, it's bringing them up bigger than what they really are. So they think they got a cause to fight. It's completely the wrong cause. They're trespassers here. A series of game-changing developments impacting the Dakota Access Pipeline battle on Friday afternoon were testament to the power of organizing. Folks, I looked at that game-changing. I look at that sentence with what I think is the reality and the truth going on in my knowledge and experience over 10 years of doing this, specific to this kind of stuff. And I said on Twitter, you'll find this. We got a short history on how this kind of played out a bit. I said, this is not game changing, this is game playing, and the Indians are being played. Listen to the code word, striking a blow to the vibrant, indigenous-led resistance movement that has sprung up against the four-state oil pipeline. A federal judge on Friday denied Standing Rock Sioux tribe's attempt to halt its construction. Vibrant and indigenous will come right out of the agenda, right out of sustainable development, right out of the UN. This is a hit piece. This is a prop piece. This is a psych piece. Shortly after, however, the Department of Justice, the Army Corps, the Department of Army, and the Department of Interior issued a joint statement indicating that important issues raised by the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and other tribal nations and their members regarding the DAPL, specifically the pipeline-related decision-making, generally remain. As a result, the statement read, construction on Army Corps of lands bordering or under Lake Oahe, which straddles North and South Dakota, will be halted until the Corps, quote, can determine whether it will be need to reconsider any of its previous decisions regarding the Lake Oahe site under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, or other federal laws. They took the lead from the judge that the NEPA wasn't argued, saying that it was consultation was actually done, to actually open the can back up, go contrary to the judge's finding, and say we're going to halt this project on something that we've already determined, but we're going to do it with a different request. There's a fourth party here. The anonymous broker, the honest broker, steps up, who's not, to go contrary to a judge's order, to say they're going to halt this against the corporation pipeline being made on private land where there hasn't been found actually any Indian impact, to shut down what they're claiming on an executive side would be this action as a question, the thought of reconsideration. To do what? To have become favorable to the Indians, doesn't it? Some of the people are actually seeing this part. Oh, this is just to quell the organization, the vibrant community, and the protest. No, folks, they could care less about that protest. They're using that protest against y'all. They're using your thought of your unity to cause anything to make it look like they're helping you out. Because they're after something else. They're after something else. And when you get into reading the black and white, and you get into using it, and you put it on the ground, and you put it in your locally, and you get it working, you see the response of this beast that we're up against, this hydra tentacled thing. This is writing on the wall what's been going on to me. Everything I was worried about on Sunday came to truth and fruition by Friday. That the government comes right out to says they want to reconsider, but then they say this. A couple things really important. If they had any power, folks, to stop this, they would stop it. But here's what they say. In the interim, the agencies continued, we request that the pipeline company voluntarily pause all construction activity within 20 miles east or west of Lake Oahe. Folks, they don't have any authority. Otherwise, they'd shut it down. Their request is not an order to stop. My thought, as soon as I saw that they were going to do that, I said they can't do that. Now they're harming the company who's putting this oil transportation system in. That's why early on you heard that there was no Army Corps of Engineers easement, and they were already going to give it. It was irrelevant. It has to go through. Why? Because there was no impacts identified. This is not treaty stuff at all. There's no impacts that were identified by the Indians themselves, who are now being led by the nose by eco-terrorists, environmental justice attorneys for social justice and all this other nonsense. That the ultimate power steps up that can't be hurt to try and protect everybody, and then only can say to the pipeline, we ask you to stop, was then qualified why I thought immediately they can't stop them, because they'd have to pay them. If they get you to voluntarily consent, you aren't harmed, aren't you? The statement continued. Further, this case has highlighted the need for a serious discussion on whether there should be nationwide reform with respect to considering tribes' views on these types of infrastructure projects. Therefore, this fall, we will invite tribes to formal government-to-government consultation on two questions. One, within the existing statutory framework, what should the federal government do to better ensure meaningful tribal input into infrastructure-related reviews and decisions and the protection of tribal lands, resources, and treaty rights? And two, should new legislation be proposed to Congress to alter the statutory framework to promote these goals? Folks, the mandate is already in the enactments of Congress that they shall perform a meaningful consultation. The judge found in this process it had been done. Why is this executive administration coming out to make that a question? They were under the control and shall seek consultation to ensure a meaningful consultation. This is the self-inflicted wound that's being exasperated by the stalking horse of the attorneys and earth justice and the UN providers at the expense, I'll say, of the native peoples. And should legislation be proposed to Congress to alter the statutory framework to promote these goals? Folks, it's a mandatory shall. You shall do this already. What extra congressional enactment can force them to do what's already in the law that they refuse to do? If that's what they didn't do, this judge says it happened. I'm telling you, they don't do this, and all they have to do is they don't need no congressional enactment. They just need to follow the existing law and agree to follow the law instead of trying to press the agenda at every turn. What they're bringing out, you just saw the stalking horse condition. The power steps up, who can't be harmed, to cause the harm, to make the outcome they need, which is to what, folks? They want to get a stakeholder called the Indian groups, which is just advisory to their whole system, who have been taken down and don't understand that, to make new rules to do what? They certainly aren't going to make new rules to do what's already there. They're going to make new rules and adjustments to take out the power that allows them to, requires that they have to do it. And what am I now speaking about? But the power of coordination, the government-to-government connection that's always supposed to happen in these issues. They're going to alter these consultation provisions in NEPA in order to take out your local power to stop the nonsense that they would have control over. Because the law is already there to mandate that they do this, and they won't. So what I would propose is, since the Indians pull back, look at what they really need to do. I've been run out of time. There's much more important things that the Indians need to do, having to do with the federal agencies that represent the government. I think Russell Means talked all about that. Bureau of Indian Affairs, all that stuff just needs to be cleaned up. You need to clean out the house of the stalking horse problem so that you have control. But you also need to enforce the laws that you have. What you should be needing, the congressional enactment you need, is the direct accountability when these agencies don't do what they're supposed to do, which the judge found in this case had been done. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I covered that with some clarity. I hope you get a new appreciation for why I tell you read the black and white, get right down to the nubbin, put the facts on the ground, stop living in our sloganisms, stop living by everybody else's perception of the world that is insanity. It's meant to take us down, and we've got to stop it. Thank you, Grimner, for allowing providing the website and the broadcaster space, the reallibertymedia.com, and there's the Social Network, Freedoms Network, the FN Network. .com, Bo Diddy's with that, and to put that together, and Jules at UCY simulcasting. I understand there's a couple of other places that simulcast that I forget to ask about. We got TuneIn and Spreaker and all this other places. Fantastic, and the terrestrial broadcasters. Thank you for what you do to pass the word to the people that don't have internet or feel that they want to keep with the radios. And I'll be here next week. We're going to move on to what the stakeholder thing is. We've got very, very powerful information on, should make your blood boil just a little bit on how this felony works against us. But I'll be here next week. Tech diffs are